Good afternoon, Cedarfield. How is everybody doing today? We have a new setup here. I'm very excited. Eddie's got us all changed up here. I don't have my microphone. I'm hands-free today, so this is exciting. So hopefully the audio sounds okay. We apologize for the problems last week. It was my understanding that you could see me, but you couldn't hear me. And if you were concerned that you were missing out on all of the wonderful information I was giving you, you weren't. When you saw me talking, that was just me and Eddie talking while we were waiting for someone to come and fix the audio, and then we could never get it worked out, so we had to kind of nix the show. But never fear, we are going to cover the topic from last week today. It's going to be a great one. I'm really excited about it. However, if you are a little squeamish, this may not be the show for you. So. But hopefully you'll hang in there. I think it'll be fun and different, and we'll learn some interesting science facts. Alrighty, so I'm not sure if you are aware, this was kind of slated to be a big event here in Richmond, and it has been kind of a dud in Richmond. But it's happening now in Northern Virginia and Maryland. So what I'm talking about is the cicada emergence. So I don't know if you've heard about this whole thing. I've been asking around here in Richmond, and not too many people are familiar with what's going on with the cicadas. So I think that's interesting, considering it's happening so close to us. But as we speak, trillions, and that's with a TRI, trillions of what is called the brood X cicadas, it's the certain species of cicadas, are emerging from the ground right now. This species only comes out of, they live underground for 17 years, and then they emerge, and we'll talk a little bit more about what happens when they do. So I guess it was in 1999, maybe they're on a different cycle, I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, right as the cicada emergence was happening there. So I got to kind of experience the tail end of it, and it's pretty amazing. Those things are everywhere, and they are loud. It's crazy. So anyway, it's happening right now in Northern Virginia and Maryland. I've heard Loudoun County is kind of the epicenter right now. I have a friend that lives there, and she posted on Facebook. She was like, "Your friends in Loudoun County are not okay right now." She's like, they just dive bomb you, and they're pelting her. She got some stuck in between her sunglasses. The shells are all over the ground. It's a mess. I had another friend who lives in Baltimore, and he picked up all the shells from underneath the tree in his backyard, and he filled an entire garbage bag. So researchers estimate that there could be up to 1 million cicadas emerging per acre of land, which is just unfathomable. Anyway, fortunately here in Richmond, or unfortunately, however you like it, we have not had, the emergence here. I'm sure we have some, but not just, in droves like other people are getting. All right, so a little bit about their life cycle. So these cicadas, like I said, they live underground for 17 years, and then when I don't know what sets them off, what it is, what makes them decide, okay, it's been 17 years, it's time to, come up. Anyway, they come up out of the ground. When the soil reaches about 64 degrees, that's their signal to come on up. They come up out of the ground. They shed their exoskeleton. So that's what people are finding, the shells of their bodies all over the place. So then they're kind of white, and then they climb up to escape predators on the ground. They climb up trees and up buildings, wherever they can go up. And then they hang out there for a while. The males are the ones that make the loud calling noises to attract the females, and then they hook up and they mate. And then the females lay their eggs, and then the eggs fall to the ground and hatch into little nymphs. And then they crawl back under the ground, and they hang out for 17 more years. And this whole process, takes about 3 to 6 weeks. It's the strangest life cycle I think I've ever heard. But, what can we say? This is how nature has decided to do it with the cicadas. But anyway, the males, when they are all grouped together and they're all doing their calling noise, to attract the females. The sound that they make, it's amazing how loud it is. So the researchers say that it can reach up to 105 decibels, which is similar to a really loud lawnmower or even a jackhammer. So it's kind of a sound to behold if you've ever experienced the cicada emergence. All right, so why am I telling you about cicadas on a nutrition show? Well, you may have guessed, one of the ways that people are dealing with this abundance of cicadas is they're eating them. So people are, they're like, well, why not? When in Rome, whatever. So they're trying the cicadas. So they are, there's a lot of adventurous eaters out there, right? They're probably weirder things that people have eaten. And there's so many, and people are just taking them home and trying out recipes at home. But there are even some restaurants that are getting on board, particularly in DC, where you've got a lot of trendy, fun restaurants. They're trying out cicada recipes. So I combed the internet for recipe ideas, and I found this one girl. Her name is Jenna Jaden. She was a University of Maryland grad student the last time they emerged, so 17 years ago. And apparently the research she was doing at the time was really boring, and she had a lot of downtime in her lab. So when this was all happening, she took advantage of that time, and she started collecting the cicadas, and she started trying out all these different recipes with them, and she even wrote a cookbook. It's called Cicadalicious, Cooking and Enjoying Periodical Cicadas. So some of the recipe ideas that are in her cookbook, and then others that I just saw on the internet and some people's restaurants, people are just simply roasting them with olive oil. People are pan frying them. They're putting them in tacos, paella. They're putting them on pizza as a pizza topping. There's even restaurants putting them in sushi or in sushi rolls. Someone had made cookies out of them. And then people are even just like dipping them in chocolate, having chocolate covered. I've seen kebabs, cicada kebabs, and there's another chef that he found some of their eggs and ate their eggs as caviar. So lots of different fun, interesting ways, if you are adventurous, to try cicadas. So what do people claim that they taste like? So I got a lot of different reports off of the internet. Some people said they have a nutty flavor. Other people said they're very similar to shrimp. And then someone said they have more of an asparagus flavor. And then other people kind of compared them to popcorn, kind of that flavor of like buttery popcorn. So who knows? I personally have not tried one, so I can't give you my opinion. And I don't think I'm going to, but you never know. All right, so Jenna Jaden, the girl who wrote the cookbook, she offered her best suggestion as to how to harvest a cicada. So she said, if you're interested in trying them, the best time to harvest a cicada is right when they come out of the ground. So pretty much immediately after they come out of the ground, which is typically around morning time. That's when they tend to emerge, if it's their day. So they'll come out of the ground, and then right after they come up, they shed that shell pretty immediately. So she said that's the best time, when they've shed that shell off, and this is not my words, she said they're white and grub-like. So they're kind of white at that point and maybe a little softer. She does recommend removing the legs and the wings so that you don't have to deal with pokey things. What else? Oh, she suggested to put them in a Ziploc bag or a freezer bag and freezing them as a humane way to kill them. And then you want to boil them to just clean them and get any kind of residue from the ground or anything off of them. And then she said they do freeze, so if you want to save them for future, since they only have, you only have an opportunity to harvest them once every 17 years, they do freeze well for future use. All right, so another very important thing, if you are one of the adventurous people who are considering trying a cicada, The USDA is recommending, or the CDC, I think it was, is recommending that if you have a shellfish allergy, that you should not eat the cicadas, just so you know. There are probably a lot of other reasons why you might not want to eat the cicada, but if you have a shellfish allergy, I guess there's some similar proteins in there that could potentially affect your shellfish allergy. All right, so this is kind of a funny little thing that we're talking about because it's, it's relevant in what's happening in our area right now with the emergence of all these cicadas. However, entomophagy is a real thing. So entomophagy is this whole concept of eating insects. And so this isn't just something that happens when these cicadas come out of the ground. This is happening all the time, all over the world for thousands of years. As you can imagine, we have plenty of insects. We eat all kinds of other animals, so why not eat these smaller, insects, right? So for whatever reason, America just has not gotten on board with that whole concept. So 80% of the world's population actually practices entomophagy, and they eat insects, that they can find in their surroundings, in their environment. But as you can imagine, that 20% who does not, probably mostly America, and other places in Europe where we're kind of accustomed to that Western diet, where it's maybe a little more taboo or kind of squeamish about eating bugs and insects. However, this is changing. There's kind of a global campaign to change people's minds and to turn towards insects as a viable source of food. So market researchers are predicting that the global edible insect industry will reach $4.63 billion by 2027. I don't know what it is now, but I'm assuming that is a huge growth for this market in this industry. And North America actually has the fastest growing market. That's probably because we have a lot of work to do on changing people's minds about eating bugs and eating insects. So right now in America, places where there's more, of the trendier restaurants, it's a little more popular to have insects of different types on the menus in different ways. And this is kind of where they're, trying out the cicadas, especially around here where they're emerging. But right now, some of the more popular uses of insects for food, here in America especially, are food manufacturers who are grounding the insects up and using it as a protein powder or putting it in protein powder as a source of protein. There's also a brand of potato chips called Chirps, Chirps chips, and they are made out, I am assuming they have potatoes, but then they also use the ground up proteins from the insects and put them into the chips. Another fun little fact, if you were to head over to Seattle and go to Seattle's T-Mobile ballpark to see a Mariners game, they actually have toasted grasshoppers for sale in their concession stand. So you could try out a toasted grasshopper. They started putting those on the menu there in 2017, and it was the top-selling concession there. So Seattle obviously has some adventurous eaters. They were excited to try those toasted grasshoppers. And I assume they're still selling them, and maybe they've expanded, I'm not sure. I did look up these Chirps chips. I was very curious to see if you could buy them here in Richmond. And the website said that Elwood Thompson had some, and I went, but I couldn't find them. So I'm still on the hunt. I might try Whole Foods and see. I was going to demonstrate them here on our show, but I wasn't able to. But if you are on the lookout for some new snacks, you can look out for those Chirps chips. All right, so why is there this big push to get people to eat insects? Like, why are people turning to insects as a source of food? I mean, obviously there are a lot of people who already are on board with this in other countries. But one of the main reasons is that insects, particularly grasshoppers, crickets, and locusts, are a very, very great source of protein. They're low calorie, but have a lot of protein. And So this is, a very sustainable source of protein. So there's a lot of different ways that harvesting and farming insects can be beneficial to our planet and to our environment. We'll talk a little bit about that. But as far as the protein, according to researchers, these, particularly like I said, the grasshoppers, the locusts, and the crickets, have more protein per serving than a piece of steak, like a serving of steak. And also they are high in those healthy, unsaturated fats. Now, I don't know what a serving of locusts or grasshoppers is. I don't know how many grasshoppers you'd have to eat to exceed the amount of protein that you get in a nice steak, but somebody obviously came up with that number. I don't know what it is. But anyway, they are a very efficient source of protein. So that is why, people look at them, especially in areas where food is scarce or people have a difficult time finding good, nutritious foods. This could be a very viable source of protein to kind of combat that food insecurity in, developing countries or low-income areas, even here in America, where we have food deserts. All right, so kind of similar to some of the reasons why plant-based proteins are so popular or getting a lot of attention right now, is kind of the same reason why people would consider farming insects for protein sources as well. Because as I mentioned, farming insects has a very low carbon footprint, and it's a very good environmentally friendly food source. So farming insects is more efficient than raising conventional livestock. It takes less land, it takes less energy, and it doesn't contribute nearly as much pollution to the air and the water as, normal, cows and pigs and chickens and things like that. So our normal conventional livestock that we're used to eating. So there's also a lot of research going into determining if insects could be a viable source of food for our conventional livestock. So not only could we be eating it, but we could also be feeding it to our livestock that we would in turn eat as a more efficient source of food, as opposed to all of the commodity crops like corn and things that we have to grow to feed our animals. We could just be feeding them insects, and then that would shore up more land for us to grow crops for ourselves and not the animals that we eat. So kind of a whole circle of crops and things like that. Also, we talked about the food insecurity. So food manufacturers are also discussing and researching how, we could just be eating insects whole as they are. Obviously, that's not as popular, but people are probably more on board to enjoy insects as an ingredient. So food manufacturers are trying to find inventive ways to use insects as an ingredient in foods rather than just proposing that we're eating whole insects, since people are, understandably not too thrilled about that, probably too thrilled about that. So, they're considered, like I said, we can ground up the insects and put them into a protein powder, where, you wouldn't really be thinking about what you're eating, or, in chips and things. But then they're also looking to see if there are functional properties of insects. Could we use them for, in gravies to form a good gel, or could they be used as an emulsifier and for any kind of products where you're mixing oil and water and you need to kind of, create a nice even texture. These are different things that, they're doing research in to find if they could be used in some of our food manufacturing. So then, of course, there's also the medicinal properties where a lot of research is happening. So just like herbs and spices and plants and flowers in lots of different cultures around the world, where these things are, these crops that are grown or these plants or flowers are grown for medicinal purposes, there are also people who use insects and bugs potentially for medicinal purposes. And then there is research going on to find, if that's valid and if that's something that could be used in the future. So there's research to see if insects have any value for cancer prevention, blood sugar regulation, whether or not the antioxidants in these insects could be beneficial to our bodies, how they can support our immune system. And then of course there are, there's always this in these kinds of industries, there are people who are claiming that insects and bugs of certain types could be aphrodisiacs or, could assist humans in those types of ways. So anyway, I'm curious to know if I've, enlightened you or changed your mind about bugs in any way, and whether you would be, if you would be curious or if you would be brave enough to try a cicada. Like I said, I have not, I probably won't be, but I don't know. I guess maybe presented in the right way, I could be tempted. We'll see. I talked to Chef Tyrone about it to see if he had any great new recipes out in the Cedar Grill, and he said no. So you don't have to worry. You will not be served any kind of cicada products or recipes or anything when you go to dinner later this week. So keep in mind, the next time you're in your apartment or your cottage and you see a little critter around and you go to swat it or spray it with your insect spray or whatever, that might be a delicacy in the future. So you might want to think twice about it. Alrighty, so hopefully I didn't lose too many viewers on this show. I understand it was a little squeamish. I had a few moments myself when I was doing some of this research, but honestly, I think it's all incredibly interesting. It's just kind of a whole new aspect of food and nutrition that's just not prevalent in our society, particularly here. But it's out there, and it's probably going to start growing, and we're probably going to start learning more about this and seeing more of this. I'm interested to see in 15 or 20 years if, maybe I will be eating bugs, maybe we all will. We'll see. Only the future can know for sure. Anyway, so I thank you to those of you who stuck with this squeamish topic. I thank you for sticking with me. I'm glad you all were here today, and we will wrap up for today, and I will see you all next week. Bye-bye.